perfectly. Jazakallah.
Thank you, Brother Zafar Qureshi. I'm extremely grateful for definitely giving the opportunity to the international NGOs, specifically working for Kashmir. And first of all, my apologies as well for being late into the session, and also my apologies for not having an adequate, I believe, a video of it. Um, However, I will be actually drawing attention to 2 points here based on the topic that I had actually received, that Kashmir is a land of humans, humans without human rights. So the 2 points that I'm going to draw attention briefly, one is going to include the health rights violation by the Indian terrorist forces. Ladies and gentlemen, as has been pointed out briefly previously as well, but I will be going into a little detail, and I will be quoting my paper on the health rights violations that were conducted in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Considering their health crisis in the Jammu and Kashmir region, in Jammu and Kashmir Valley, can be categorized into different categories. That would include the torture, the pellet rain that occurs in the Indian occupied valley, the access to the healthcare that's been denied repeatedly, the excessive use of the force by the Indian forces over there, and Kashmir by itself being a mental health disaster. Ladies and gentlemen, let me draw your attention to a report that was published previously from the people on ground, that's the civil society particularly, that quoted almost 432 cases. And out of those 432 cases, at least 222 suffered health issues. And we must understand that of those 222, 209 suffered from long-term illnesses. And the long-term illnesses definitely need an access to a health care. This is not it. What we know that the torture cells that were established and the torture that was being conducted in those torture cells included being beaten up, electrocuted, being stripped. Even people were used as human shields. Sexual torture has been so common, and all this has resulted into a barrage of number of diseases, kidney failures, hypertension, cardiac issues, and all of these have been documented. The second category that I had just said about is the pellet rain. Everybody by now, I'm sure, knows what a pellet exactly is and what a pellet gun actually constitutes of. As far as the positions for human rights reports concerned, back in 2016, SMHS has received almost 933 cases of pellet victims in over just a month. And over the months that continued and followed, the SMHS received almost 837 cases of pellets, blinding Kashmiri youth, age ranging from 10 to 25 years. So this is not it. That's not the pellet. The pellet gun is not the only thing. The less lethal, so-called less lethal weapon that is being used by the Indian forces over there. It's the power shells as well. The power shells and the excessive pepper gases that are being used. And medically, it causes irritation, not only when it comes in contact with the eyes, the skin, the nose, and the throat. It can actually ultimately damage your lungs. And this is, ladies and gentlemen, a true form of biological terrorism that is being conducted in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So what we need to understand at the last point is the access to healthcare is very important. Anybody who feels even slightly down as far as the health is concerned, the person rushes to the hospital, the family rushes to the hospital. But as far as the healthcare access is concerned in the Indian occupied valley, it has been denied greatly to the Kashmiris. What we must understand is that the ambulances containing Kashmiri youth, particularly injured Kashmiri youth, were never allowed to reach the hospitals within time, so that whatever and whoever Kashmiri is in the ambulance dies before reaching the hospital. Over the past 1 year, the military siege that we have seen in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, almost 3,000 to 4,000 drug distributors were unable to smoothly continue their chain of drug delivery to the pharmacies. What we must understand, there has been a serious lag in the chemotherapy and the radiotherapy sessions. The elective surgery dates were postponed. Many pregnant females could not reach to the hospital, and ultimately We never know, may have even died of the complications. There have been reports, particularly by the Physicians for Human Rights as well, that post 5th of August, this healthcare staff had to work relentlessly beyond 60 hours or more. All this has resulted in a mental chaos that has actually resulted at this point in time into a PTSD, 26% anxiety patients, almost 41% depression symptoms in the Kashmiri people. Ladies and gentlemen, my second point that I want to actually draw the attention to is something that is known as feminism. Feminism all over the world. People talk about women and children, particularly in the conflict zones, and the world's attention is drawn towards every woman in the conflict zone. Perhaps every atrocity that has been committed, particularly the word rape that we use, brings fear to the minds of people. And it's not just the females that it brings fear to, it's the men as well, the people who have a heart, who have a feeling. But when we talk about Kashmir, we feel and we see ranging from 1990s, the mass rape of Kanan Pashpura to Mobina Ghani, a bride who was raped on the night of her wedding. Then we talk about Asia and Nilofa. And then we talk about the people, the Kashmiri resistance leadership, who has actually demanded the right of self-determination. And everybody agrees to it, that this right of self-determination is a just right backed by the United Nations resolutions. I'm talking about the social reformist, the biggest social reformist of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Asia Andrabi. Asia Andrabi currently is being lodged in the New Delhi Tihar jail, shifted from the Srinagar Central Jail with a cumulative incarceration period of almost 12 years. Now, what I feel is that there is a serious lack of the feminist organizations all over the world talking about her, about Nahida Nasreen and Fahmida Sufi, two of her associates along with her. What I fail to understand is that why is there a standard demarcation of that you have to talk about this female and you won't be able to talk about this female? Why is there a difference if a female is actually carrying a veil? You don't talk about her. I mean, the strangest thing is that you are being so liberal, you're being so liberal that you're ultimately becoming radical to it. But you will not be talking about this one and you'll be talking about the other females. What is more important at this point in time, I believe, is that in this conflict zone, in this international armed conflict of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, we must highlight the plight of women and children equally as well. And particularly, we must talk about all those women who have been not only sacrificing, but also the women who have been standing against the illegal oppression, the illegal occupation. Ladies and gentlemen, what I believe is that Kashmir should be taken as a book, and that's what we are working on. Me being the president of Kashmir Youth Alliance, I consider that Kashmir as a whole is dynamic. And the only way that we can actually cover it is by taking it in chapters. And those chapters need to be divided among our youth properly. For the lawyers, it's going to be the legal part. For the civil society, it's going to be the civil part. The doctors, medics, educationists, reformists, everybody takes one part of the chapter of Kashmir book. The more important thing in the last few words of mine, ladies and gentlemen, would be that we must understand that Kashmir is not just a political issue. It's not just a territorial issue. Kashmir by itself is an amalgam of various dimensions. It's not, it's actually a legal aspect as well, but we must also understand the religious fervor in it. We must understand that people, whenever they're denied a congregation at Jummah, definitely it affects them, not only mentally, but also physically as well. We must understand that the youth of today, that the youth in Kashmir, Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, at this point in time has been pushed against the wall, and the only option that is actually left for them is to give their life and take one along with it. The world must listen, the world must understand that at this point in time, Kashmir is not boiling at the right temperature. It may spill over at any given time, and once it does, the effects and the results are devastating. Thank you.